Hey everyone, I'm super excited for you to meet today's guest, Ruth Alvarez-DeGolia. She is the executive director and co-founder of Mercado Global. Mercado Global is a nonprofit that focuses on amplifying and providing access to incredible fashion products from indigenous women in the Guatemalan highlands. Ruth talks about the origin story of where Mercado Global came from back in 2004. She talks about her journey to completely making a career pivot into this industry that is really all about eradicating poverty. And Ruth is so generous in talking about the kind of twists and the turns and the reality of what it is to be an entrepreneur in the social impact space before social entrepreneurship was like the cool thing to do and to be in, and what it looks like now compared to what it was like when she first started back in 2004. She also talks about what it is to build a business with the belief and the centered mission around partnership, both partnering with these incredible artisans in the Guatemala Highlands, these incredible indigenous women that have a resiliency level that many of us probably in our lifetimes won't necessarily get to. But the fact that this work that these women are doing that is passed down from mother to daughter, generation over generation, not only is an incredible opportunity to build a flourishing business to help empower these women and to create a sustainable life in their homes, but also is such a wonderful healing process, not just for these women, but for each and every one of us who receives these amazing fashion products. It's not just about fashion. It's not just about helping others. It's really about this thread of healing and humanity and connectivity. And I think that Ruth does an incredible job sharing her journey and what that looks like in real life, not just the relationship between the organization and the partners within that organization, whether that be the folks on the ground in Guatemala as on the operations side of bringing these products into America and beyond to be able to then be sold in world renowned retail environments, so that this incredible flow of support can be felt far and wide, but also how beneficial it is to build a company based on this level of partnership on the donor side, on the fundraising side as well. That is not just about dollars and cents, it's about the ability to build partnership that has a level of depth that's transformative and not just transactional. So if you are somebody that's been thinking about investing in your career in a way that is bringing more social impact, initiatives into the forefront, whether that be completely shifting your career into the nonprofit space or spending a lot more of your time and energy to be supporting nonprofits, or to be, to join a team rather than starting a nonprofit. See if there's a nonprofit out there that's doing the stuff that you're passionate about and being able to kind of be an entrepreneur in that space to be able to offer not just your dollars, but that kind of social capital and that intellectual capital you have as well to be able to make a true impact within these organizations, that are not only really great business models, which Ruth talks about how they have come out on the other side of COVID doing incredibly well, which was like, what? So I'm excited for you to hear that, but also how important and impactful it is for each and every one of us to feel connected to people and to places that a lot of times we haven't been encouraged to understand the stories from or hear even the voices of. We talk a lot about the models of gatekeeping that keep people from being able to be heard still in 2022, after we've had so many years of conversation around passing the microphone and having more people's stories being told, that there are still very real barriers to entry for many people's stories and voices, whether that be through very specific processes like getting your visa, or it be through the barriers socially of language and cultural differences. And so if any of this sounds interesting to you, this episode is going to like knock your socks off. I'm excited for you to get to know more about Mercado Global, because I was introduced to Mercado Global due to some kismet. I was introduced from an amazing person in my alumni community that I created to be on a panel to talk about imposter syndrome. And through that, I got the opportunity to meet some incredible women that have been really changing the game. And Ruth is for sure one of those women. And she talks about in this episode, amplifies so many other incredible women that are changing the game. So I can't wait for you to get to know Ruth and to get to know Mercado Global and hopefully become part of the family. I don't know, maybe. I'm excited for you to meet her. Let's get to it. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Checkbox Other. I am beyond excited for you to meet Ruth today. Ruth and I met what feels like yesterday and also a million years ago, but it was just a few years ago at a wonderful event for her organization, Mercado Global. Ruth, I'm going to pass the microphone over to you to give a little bit of what I like to call a Cliff Notes version of your journey. I talk about it as the aha moments, the twists, the turns, and all the things that kind of led you to where you are today and what you're doing. So welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you so much, Nikki. It's an honor to get to be here with you, and I'm really looking forward to getting to chat. And boy, the Cliff Notes version of Mercado Global. I guess I would say that when I was an undergrad at Yale, I had the amazing opportunity to receive several fellowships to go work with community-based organizations in rural Guatemala, and then do research for my thesis. And coming out of that whole process, I met these amazing women who were fighting. They were fighting to feed their kids, to provide for their families. Many were widows from the Civil War. And most had never had the chance to go to school and were living in just really extreme poverty. And yet these were some of the strongest, most inspirational women I'd ever met. And while I was down there, I was working with these community-based organizations, and we were doing everything else that we could doing community health work. I was helping a lot of these community-based organizations build their own websites and do grant writing. And the challenge was that there was just so little international aid, especially 6 years after the end of the Civil War in Guatemala. And, in the US, only 6% of philanthropic giving goes to international causes. So just very, very little aid, so much need, so much. And what really just struck me in community after community where I was working and the women that I was meeting was that they just wanted a chance to have their own income and access to market. And that was where Mercado Global started. It started as just a favor to these amazing women I was working with, where they asked me to take their artisaniyas back to, quote, wherever I came from and sell them for them. And I remember the first weekend back at campus at Yale, we sold $5,000 in products, and it sent 26 little girls to elementary school for a year in that first weekend, which was really, really amazing. And that's where it started. And I was, doing all these other things. And it took me a while to realize that of everything that I was doing, this was what was most transformational, and what the women that I admired were asking for that partnership. And that's where Mercado Global started.
That's so cool. And so much of when you're investing your journey in this stuff and what I believe like universally energetically leads you to these paths, there's so much about your personal life that resonates with these things and why it stood out so much. Can you talk a little bit about how like you personally, how that resonated with your personal journey that like matched so nicely with Mercado Global's creation? Because I think there is so much power in one, I think the part of you saying like, I'm so inspired by, but also seeing so much of what you see and how you view the world and your values kind of being mirrored in these opportunities showing up.
Yeah. Well, I think the work that we do was very important to me for several reasons. I mean, one, just at the beginning stage, I come from a background where one side of my family is very involved in business and investing, and the other side of my family, everyone's a labor leader or in the labor movement. Cool. So this was the first thing I ever did that both sides of my family appreciated. And it was a bit of a transformational journey for me in that, I definitely kind of went into undergrad thinking of business is bad, markets are bad, and it was this journey for me to realize. And actually, my thesis was about the impact of globalization on rural Latin America. And I went in thinking, globalization is all bad and negative. And it was this process to realize globalization is neither positive nor negative. It's just a tool, and it's a tool that is traditionally not in the hands of indigenous peoples. And if you could build some new types of businesses that put market access and the power of globalization into the hands of rural communities, it could be very transformational. so that was a really interesting journey for myself, and to realize, capital, of course, capital is power. How could we build new businesses that put that power into the hands of rural women, of indigenous women, people who've been so often excluded from market access and from the economy. So that was one piece of the journey.
Cool.
I think the other piece was when I started Mercado Global back in the day, 2004. It was before social entrepreneurship was this big, kind of sexy, exciting field that people wanted to be part of. And I remember when I was undergrad, kind of being on track, thinking, oh, I'm going to go to law school. I'm going to try to get one of those prestigious fellowships when you graduate. And I remember that for me, it was this moment of transformation after the first summer when I went to Guatemala. In my first 2 years at Yale, I'd loved it. I'd been so happy. And I came back, and when I was in Guatemala that summer, I'd never felt so useful in my entire life, where I, met all these amazing people, and I had something to offer that was helpful to them. I could help them build their websites, build their funding streams for their community-based organizations, and be in partnership in a way that was just the most rewarding thing I had ever done. And I came back to Yale, and all people were doing was talking about it, and nobody was actually doing anything. And I was just over it. And I remember coming back, and actually I was, to be honest, I became quite depressed, which had never happened to me before. And I went through this whole period of realizing, it was totally non-prestigious that I came back and I was selling things on campus. That was not what you did to get ahead at Yale.
Oh, yeah.
And I realized, I remember telling myself, I'm taking myself out of the rat race. Like, I'd worked so hard to get to, I was so focused on the rat race, and I was like, none of these things that everybody else says matter to me. The only thing that matters to me is just selling as much product as I can for these amazing women, so as many of their daughters could go to school. That is the most important thing. And it was crazy that through that process of deciding to no longer focus on what other people thought was important and just listen to what was important to me, that it became this amazing opportunity and journey for me too. So
I just need to tell you this, because like you can't feel my body right now.
Yeah.
I've been like on the verge of tears and covered in chills the whole time you've been talking about this. I think there is so much power in that story, because I think so many of us can relate to that. You've told me I'm supposed to do it this way, but like everything inside of me is telling me to turn left when you're telling me to turn right.
Right.
And the power and the trust you have in yourself to make those choices, but also just like the activating energy that happened in that experience that you were going to go do a fellowship and see how, part of this process, it's part of this journey. And for it to be like, I just awakened a part of myself that I didn't know existed. I'm breathing in a way I never breathed before. Like, again, I'm getting chills just channeling back to what you were just saying of like how powerful that is. And I think, it's so funny that in all the movies and all the things, all the things are supposed to be about the life we're trying to lead. Like, those are the moments that making life feel like it goes from black and white to Technicolor. And yet the right path, if we continue on it, robs us of so much of that kind of beauty and that nuance. I heard some other stories that popped up in that. But I always like to open up for anything you want to bring to the table. If there's been a time in your life where you have felt other or different, or as though you didn't belong, I'm sure there's more chills to come. So I'd love to hear any that you're willing to share.
Sure. Well, I mean, for me, first and foremost, I'm so privileged to be, as a white woman, to so rarely be in the situation that I'm, I feel that I'm the other in the way that so many people that I work with and in my family have that experience. And I think, for me, I think for everyone who's fortunate enough to be seen as individuals and not to be grouped as the other and have those stereotypes about them, it's really important to do everything you can to go on a journey to understand that, and to understand how that means that the way you experience the world is different, And so I think for me, you know, that was a process as well. And then is part of what made me so passionate about doing what I do, because for the women that we work with, to me, they're our partners. We're all women. You know, I constantly think about how, gosh, Guatemala is closer to New York City than LA is to New York City, you know, like, but for the grace of God, this could have been me and my sister, my mom that was born in Guatemala and didn't have the chance to go to school. You know, like, how lucky are we, right? And then feeling a responsibility to be in partnership with these other women who are in this different experience.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, in the process of building the organization and, you know, who my friends are, who the people are that I've built the organization with, who I married, to realize it's one thing to intellectually know that I experienced life differently. And it's another thing to be in a series of circumstances where I'm actively treated differently than someone very important to me. And then to realize, like, makes me so angry. And but like, what a luxury to even be able to get angry, because I know that I'm never going to have a consequence for showing anger, you know? Yeah. And so then there's like a whole bunch of things around that. So I think constantly thinking about that and talking about that and trying to be aware of that, especially within our organization, where we have people from all over the world. You know, most of our staff are indigenous women, but we have people that have moved from Argentina, from Mexico, from Brazil to work for us. Yeah. And we navigate across all these different ways of labeling ourselves, you know, white versus indigenous, Latin American, you know, are we all American, or Latin American versus North American, right. You know, corporate versus nonprofit, fashion versus international development.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. All those categories that are forcing you to choose one, where you're like, we are many. What are you talking about? Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I would say, and despite recognizing that I come from this place of extreme privilege, where I had the chance to go to this college that opened so many doors, and still, when you're 21, starting a nonprofit, and first you're 21, then you're a woman and you're going out raising money, really hard, and lots of, as a woman, you know, being the only woman, much less a young woman in the room, for a lot of the important client meetings and donor meetings, and navigating that, you know, definitely a challenge.
Yeah. And navigating that, it's so funny, you know, I feel like so often when you enter a room, especially like a pitch room about something you're really passionate about, you're navigating the elements of yourself.
Yeah.
That are seen as, oh, well, you're not the prototype of what I expect to see in this pitch meeting. But also when you're standing there representing a group of people that have been left behind and not considered as part of the funding model. I did not know that only 6% of philanthropic dollars went internationally. That's mind-blowing. Also, again, we're talking about women, we're talking about indigenous women, we're talking about people that are creating such incredible things that so often people don't necessarily covet for the beauty and the story and the passion and the heart that's within them. And so it's so interesting, because not only as the individual, but also occupying space for something that is so powerfully important that hasn't always been valued in the way that it should, is something that to be grappled with. And you know, it's funny, I think one of the things that why I created this podcast in the first place is that I think we all have moments in our lives where we feel like we don't belong. Whether it's something that is nationally broadcast and given language to, or it's that feeling that we have inside our body and we don't know exactly what it is, but we know it doesn't feel good. And I think it is so important for us to create space for that reality for each and every one of us, because that's what builds resilience, our ability to kind of through that. One of the things that I love about what you talked about early in the kind of the Mercado Global story, as the kind of social entrepreneurship was not like a thing in the same way that it is now in 2004, and, you know, generational dynamics shifting in our cultural landscape, power, wealth transfers, all of that, and just how value systems have changed. Can you talk a little bit about what it's been like to kind of ride the roller coaster of that shift and change, and being one of the people that's like, I was here before this was cool, like here's where I was, and how you kind of view that shift in trend and how that's impacted you and your organization, but like, what's your view kind of being on the inside of that change?
Yeah, yeah. Speaking specifically to social entrepreneurship and the rise of that. Yeah. Well, gosh, I think, quite a few things. First of all, I think to build a successful organization, organizations are like living things, and you have to constantly fight to improve and be better internally, but also externally, and thinking about how to be relevant to what's going on in the world, right? And so there's so many ways that we've had to reinvent ourselves or reconnect with different parts of what makes what we do important, but through a lens of what might be relevant to others at different points. But I think, when it comes to the rise of social entrepreneurship, I think a couple of things. One, it's really exciting. I think creating new organizations or new approaches to tackling entrenched social problems is exciting, and is where there's so much energy and so much potential, and where we need people to be focused to tackle the challenges that we face as a world. At the same time, I think there's also some downsides. So I know one thing that I don't always hear social entrepreneurs or founders talk about that I think is really important is how hard it is. I feel like I'm often on panels with other founders where people are like, oh, kind of giving the impression that they're just born knowing how to do this and they're really smart and it happened. And like, nobody talks about, well, what about when you were looking for coins in your sofa? Because I bet every single one of you had to do that at one point or another. And like, especially if you're starting a nonprofit, unless you come from immense wealth.
Right. Yeah.
And so I do think it's important to recognize that I have a lot of friends that are, like Echoing Green Fellows or Shoka Fellows or, started organizations, and almost everyone, paid a big price for it too, like incredibly rewarding at a personal level, but also went through really intense hardship.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to be open about that, because it's not for everyone. And sometimes you could have like entrepreneurship, within an existing organization or company, you can find ways to leverage those resources, not have to rebuild a whole new infrastructure. So I think it's important to talk about that too. But that said, it's great to have it be valued.
And even have the language around it, I think too, right? When you're advocating in a space that people aren't as familiar with, and it becomes part of the like normalized lexicon, you're like, oh, okay, I don't have to spend half my pitch explaining what this is anymore. Cool. We can focus and get to the real stuff and the meat of what we're doing. I think that's really, really powerful. One of the things that is, I think, so intriguing is this idea of the importance of showing up with the idea of being able to activate that motivating kind of innovative thought process without needing to recreate the wheel or kind of different, unique and individual. I was actually, just before we hopped on here, I was at a meeting talking to another founder about like that kind of, we were talking about like the isolation of being a founder and how like we all talk about like, we just magically made it overnight. It's like, no, we didn't. Stop it. Like this stuff is really hard. So I would love to kind of like just talk a little bit about the impact of what it has been like collaborating as the evolution's happening. I know that a huge part of at least what I've been able to witness with what how you've built this business over time and the relationships you've built is a lot of that is by welcoming people kind of into the family and into the fold of Mercado Global in a whole bunch of different ways. Can you talk about that? I mean, and I do I want to get in front of myself? There's a lot of it that is, I see a lot of women-founded organizations that you're working with, a lot of women stepping up and bringing not only just financial support, but that kind of intellectual capital and that social capital that comes along with it. Can you talk a little bit about how that's shaped the journey and for you personally, as you're a founder creating space for this stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a whole bunch there. I think, first of all, I think that one of the most important jobs of the executive director or the founder is to get the right people on the bus, right? And so that means both staff, but also means all of your key partners and stakeholders that are going to be key to ensuring the success of the organization. And when it comes to building external partnerships, I think it's about really looking for the win-wins and not thinking about just, what can they do for you, but what can you do for them? And it's the partnerships where there's real value added going both ways are the ones that are going to be most successful. And I think in many ways, when I was just starting, separately, like a little story is our first 2 years, I never asked for money. And like, I was lucky I'd raised a bunch of startup money, but through like competitions and grant applications. And then I never asked anyone for money. And of course, it was a problem that I had to get over. But part of how I did that was to realize that, when you're fundraising, you're really, you have to rethink how you think about money, that, if you have resources, what better place to put those resources than to making the world a better place?
Yeah.
And you're giving people an opportunity to be part of that, right? Yeah. And so I think it's like the same thing when you're building external partnerships. We partner with a lot of women's initiatives within companies, especially. And the way that I think about it is so many women in finance and tech have had to overcome so much to get ahead in their careers. And sure, it's different than the challenges that the women we partner with face, but in many ways, it's actually not that different. It just has a different face. It's a degree, it's different in terms of degree, right? Yeah. But the core issues are all the same. And so finding there's this power you unlock when you bring women together to work on these issues so that you don't feel alone. You're helping each other. And really the support goes both ways. So I think it's exciting to find those win-wins. It's also important to know when to say no. I think it's you have finite time and resources. You got to put your time and resources on the partnerships that are really going to work. Yeah. And so it's a process to think about that. But yeah, I love the partnerships we've built. I mean, within the world of finance and fashion and tech, and then people get excited by being together at our events and on our trips to Guatemala and things like that too. So
I love, it's so funny in bearing witness to this over the past couple of years of being able to kind of watch how even just the messaging and the opportunities you create for people to be and create their own individual connection to the mission, the purpose, and then the kind of the actual reality of the day-to-day of the business. It is such a powerfully important thing. My background, I worked in asset management, and one of the parts of my job became kind of running a big part of our nonprofit sector. I shouldn't say nonprofit sector. One of the biggest kind of philanthropy initiatives, we launched a whole brand on it because, one of the people that was part of our founding team then ran for president. So there was all this bad press and we're like, wait, but we've been doing all this great stuff. Let's tell people. But the interesting part in that was that I interacted with so many different nonprofit organizations, folks that had been around for, many, many decades, and kind of the newer nonprofits. And it was such an interesting experience because not only was it age of nonprofit innovation, comfort with the fundraising dynamics, how you get involved, but also internally within the organization, I was working with folks that had been donors for 25, 30 years, and people that were just coming into a place of wealth, that the value systems changing around, like, the reason I'm working here is because of how it aligns with my values, how it aligns with my ability to build my philanthropy portfolio. Yeah. It was such an interesting change because the traditional thing was like, can you give me this amount of dollars so you can come and sit at this gala, which works. And also there was this, one of the things that I was like screaming about in the kind of the groups that were just like, can we just get the dollars? And like, yes, we can. And also let's get dollars on dollars so that this effort is building a relationship that like you're going to be in rooms that you're not in otherwise. And so I'd love to hear your take on this, because I think especially that generation, this was years ago now, that generation is now in positions of leadership and management, and that just going to become more and more of the population that's saying, all right, yes, you can have my money, but also I want to have more stake in the game. I want to bring people with me. I want this to be part of the fabric of my life, not just the tax write-off that it is at the end of the day. Can you talk about how that's kind of shifted or changed participation and your approach to the fundraising game, but also just like finding that space of the collaborators outside of like the official sponsor side of things?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that the more we in turn, partnership is one of our core values as an organization, and we think of our partner artisans as partners, and we think of our donors as partners.
Yeah.
And the more you could have a true partnership, the more successful we'll be. So absolutely, with our donors, we're always thinking of what are the opportunities for engagement? How can we provide value added to our corporate partners and to our donors? So we really focus on lots of ways that people can engage and help and share their time and talent in addition to their treasure in advancing this work. So I think that's really important. And the better we do at that, the more we're able to raise, the more we're able to get done as an organization. I think at the same time, one thing, especially when it comes to corporate philanthropy, that I think is important to keep in mind is for the nonprofit sector to work, it is true that the treasure piece, you need money to run an organization, right? So sometimes it is funny. Sometimes every now and then we'll meet with a new prospective corporate partner and they're like, well, where we feel we really can provide added value is volunteering. And I always think, well, if there's one thing that rural Central America doesn't have, it's a labor shortage. Like
you could do that too, but
exactly, you could do that too, but
that's so funny.
Which is part of why I always think it's interesting when people kind of like missionary trips to other parts of the world, or even within the US, are good in that I think you can learn to walk in someone else's shoes. You could experience what's going on. It can make you a better ally, but recognize that might be the primary value of it. It's not that,
right.
If you're going into a community that doesn't have a labor shortage, maybe that it's about making you a better ally and a better, more informed donor than
than it is having like the vacation experience or the separate living. It's so funny because I think there is, and God, it's like I sent you questions ahead of time a little bit. There's a whole complex, I think, that especially the last few years of like larger conversation about how allyship can actually be effective versus it being something that soothes a sense of guilt. This feeling of like saviorism versus like actual generative contribution that is consensually asked for and received appropriately. Can you talk a little bit about how that how that dynamic has been such a big part of, because even in the way you answered the question, I feel like it's part of the fabric of how you're operating, and also being met with folks that are like, we want to help, but the way I'm used to doing that is like, let's go and step in as, missionaries that can impart our knowledge, versus I think of you as 21-year-old you stepping in and being like, this is a really cool space. Oh, this is the pocket where you need support. I actually have that support. Let me offer it to you, rather than me being like, I know exactly what you need. I've never been here before, but I know exactly what you need. You talk about how that kind of dance has gone, because I'm sure it's very real. Yeah,
it's quite a dance. Yeah. And it's something that we're always working to navigate in a higher impact way. So I think for me, it starts with, I really believe in values-based leadership, and our core values as an organization are partnership, authenticity, and respect. And I always feel like we have to go to those for our moral compass to understand how to navigate things like this. And so from the very beginning, because the organization really came out of these amazing women who were so strong and who were fighting and who needed partnership, they needed allyship to be able to access the market, to get the training they needed to have income for their families, right? And I think that for the population that we work with, one of the many things that's so horrible about racism and sexism is removing respect. And so just the act of being in partnership with these women and with total respect for them, and not seeing them, I mean, to me, in this, especially in our early days, this was sometimes very controversial, maybe like, we don't use the term beneficiary, because for us, these women are our partners. We're all in partnership, and it's about striving to be allies. And that comes from a place of really deep respect for how hard these women are fighting and what they're up against and what they're doing, right? And so, in the early days, I remember having lots of problems with foundations that wanted you to use the word beneficiary in every grant application extensively, which didn't feel authentic to me.
Yeah.
But then also when we're building the organization and building our partnerships, sometimes it's about teaching in multiple directions. So, we do insight trips to Guatemala for our top clients, our top donors, our top partners.
Yeah.
And those experiences are very different from what I think people might have thought it would be. So anyone who comes on that trip is going, giving something as well. So if the women we work with are sharing their experience, everyone gives something. It might be like a training, it might be, sharing their experience that can be helpful. Also, everyone's supporting in different ways, right? And people often come and they're like, oh, can I bring soccer balls, or can I help build a house? And it's like, that's not what's needed here.
Yeah.
This is about partnership, and you're coming to have the gift of learning about someone else's experience. So you can go back and be an amazing ambassador and ally for them. And we have a lot of conversations about it internally as an organization too, of, what's the best way to navigate all these things. So
yeah, it's so funny. I had a guest on recently, Asha Ramakrishna. We were talking about sacred commerce and the kind of idea of the energetic reciprocity of that exchange of trade historically, before we were in a capitalistic structure, right? Like what it was to be able to have an equal energetic exchange. And it wasn't necessarily about, I have more, so therefore I dictate what I give. And I think that we are learning that doesn't always create success. And I'm like nicely saying all that. Oftentimes it creates chasms in places we don't know until we're trying to step on something that's broken, right? Yeah. And so there is a part of this that is so beautiful, because it's encouraging people to share the wisdom they have and also receive. So be open enough to be able to share and understand how your wisdom is actually relevant versus like the script you would use in any other place you're going to. Yeah. And also be prepared that like you're going to learn things about yourself in the world that you didn't know before. They might make you feel good. They might make you feel awful. They might make you question a whole bunch of things. They might make you change your path in something like they did for Ruth. Like there is so much that can't be quantified, that this exchange of being in the presence of people that are so incredibly transformative and the work that you're doing that is so pivotal can do for you. Can you talk a little bit about like, there's a part of me that's like, I want to talk about all these amazing women. There's a part of me that as I was reading more about kind of the back end of like, I shouldn't say back end, the origin story of why these women, specifically coming out of a civil war, are so incredibly resilient, and also how much activating power it is to just be like, this is incredible stuff they were already doing. There's incredible opportunity here to just support and amplify. We don't need to take the story from, how do we create that? Can you talk a little bit about, because I think there's something unique. Maybe this, I'm a little biased. I'm biased in this, I'm aware. There's something like really powerful about the resilience of women coming out of kind of really tragic situations / challenging situations. And so often there is this idea, and it's funny when you're talking about anger not necessarily being allowed here, that there is something that's so catalyzing in how resilience can activate so much power, bravery, but also healing and rebuilding. I'm sure you've seen many versions of this. Can you talk a little bit about how that kind of interplay in the reality of the history and near-term history has impacted how you do this work?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think some of this gets back to why respect is so important within our organization, that when you have not had that, it's so fundamental to feeling whole as a person, to have self-respect and to feel treated with respect. And it's essential to feeling safe, to feeling even able to build, that you're going to have the chance to build the life that you want for yourself and for your family. So I think, for us, so much of how we work starts with that, and also starts with partnerships. So, for example, we don't work with individual women, we work with co-ops. We help women build community co-ops so that the women are supporting each other within the co-op. And there's so many reasons why we do that. One is when most of the women we're working with may not be able to read and write. It's important to be doing this as a co-op so that the women who can help those who don't. Everyone helps each other build a successful business, right? It's because there's so many challenges the women we work with face on a daily basis, and we can't be in the communities 24/7. Yeah. And so the women can support each other, especially on the things that we can't be there to help them with. And I think working with traditional weaving, we always say that we're fundamentally an anti-poverty organization, and cultural preservation is this wonderful externality that we have to our model. Mm-hmm. But it's an important one because being a weaver and this tradition that's been passed down for generations within families from mother to daughter is so important. And actually taking away the market for weaving, which is one of the things that's been happening, which is a whole nother thing, can feel like a loss of identity, a loss of pride. And so by helping the women create not just any market, but a real sustainable market where they can earn a great wage that allows them to send their kids to school and do all of this, is just a huge source of pride for the women. Yeah. So it's exciting that we've been able to build a model that builds on that. So that's
it's, I was part of a panel that was getting pitches from young ambassadors at the UN UNGA, UN General Assembly that week. Prior to it, it was called Camp Unite 2030, and it was bringing people from all over the world together to come up with solutions to the kind of the priorities the UN had set forth. And one of the groups that pitched to us was actually a group that was focusing on bringing a food truck business or creating a food truck model to offer farmers in the indigenous pockets in Guatemala, a really opportunity to have that farming knowledge and wisdom be able to not only be something to have, bring in funds, but also to empower kind of being able to leverage the beautiful, like farm to table type energy without it needing to become some big fancy gourmet thing or feel so distant and different, but really creating a space that's like, you already have all of the skills you need for this. And so one of the things I hear as you're talking about this is like, I'm not trying to reinvent something that you already know how to do. I just want to be able to use the platform I have to activate and amplify. Especially, I think, again, in areas and parts of our world that haven't been given the spotlight, the microphone, or the platform, how powerful even just saying, hey, this is something you all need to hear about can be so transformative. Can you talk a little bit about how that is? I mean, it sounds like it's just like baseline part of your model. You're like, I'm not trying to change what you're doing. I just want to tell people about it.
No, I mean, absolutely. So by the tradition of the co-op is a big part of indigenous culture in the region where we work. And then weaving is a big part of the culture. And so helping women access financial resources and access markets through these structures that are so familiar and comfortable to them. And it really is, it's about building a model that is authentic to the communities that need access to this international market, right? But it's also about lifting up voices and trying to bring that spotlight to peoples who have not had that. And that's something that we're always trying to get better at, and can be a big source of frustration for us. So, for example, the head of our operations in Guatemala is this amazing indigenous woman. All of our leadership for operations in Central America are indigenous women. And it's such a struggle to find opportunities to get them on an international platform, starting with it's almost impossible to get people visas to come to the US or Europe. So just at a very basic level, that will be an issue. And then, we have a program, we decided to prioritize teaching our top staff English as much as possible, because that's such a big barrier, but that's not something that happens overnight. That takes time. And so then the language barrier becomes a huge, because first of all, everyone we work with, including our staff, the indigenous languages are their first language. Spanish is their second language if they speak Spanish at all, right? And then English would be a third language for those who who learn it. And it's so frustrating how between the visa barrier and the language barrier, it's hard to lift up the voices of our team and of the women we serve the way we'd like. And it was actually interesting. One of the small silver linings during the pandemic was that TV shows were open to doing Zoom interviews instead of in-person interviews. And so we actually got a bunch of TV coverage for our leadership in Guatemala because of that, on international, like Univision and like, things that like that, in a way that unfortunately I think is no longer possible. But so I love that by our model, we're connecting these communities to the international market and to a global platform, but we'd like to do an even better job at that than we've been able to.
Yeah. I love, it's so funny. The thing that keeps popping in my head as we're talking is that part where you were talking about the beginning of like the two sides of your family wonderfully coming together in the work that you do, because I think there is so much of what you're talking about that is so much passion driven things from two supposedly different places, but really the kind of unifier of bringing them together and understanding, like, as you're talking about this, that like, unfortunately, access to that platform has all of these like hoops you have to jump through and gatekeepers that you have to make sure understand what you're doing or you're speaking the same language of, or all of that, and how the kind of flattening of that process. COVID had a whole lot of not really great things, but the flattening of that process really did open doors that seemed like they might not even exist or weren't going to open. Can you talk a little bit about how you're pivoting and shifting and changing in COVID? I mean, I know that there was a lot that you did, and also that was impacted by this very real issue of one, being in two different locations where you can't travel, but also two, just the impacts of a pandemic on various populations, and populations that might not necessarily usually have the level of support that might be needed in something like a pandemic.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, boy, it seems like we've lived over a decade in 2 years.
I was like, I met you yesterday, but I met you 20 years ago. So.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Well, so first of all, I think for us, the reason we were able to both survive the pandemic and actually honestly thrive and come out even stronger really came down to having a great team. That if you have the right team, then and you have a system to work together, you can tackle huge challenges when they come. So I think for us, it started with, I remember when the pandemic was first hitting New York City really hard, in March 2020, that my WhatsApp just started blowing up with our artisans and our staff in Guatemala. Were so worried about our staff in New York City and our donors in New York City. And everyone at the time, it was being portrayed as something happening in New York City. Everyone just wanted to help. And the team in Guatemala came up with this idea of, well, we have all this overstock fabric. Let's just grab it and just start making masks and start sending them to hospitals, because the hospitals in New York City didn't have cotton masks at the time. And then we partnered with some of the women in finance networks that we have in the city who wanted to do something, but also were like, what could we do? They became in charge of helping us distribute all these masks to the hospitals. So remember in March, we donated almost 20,000 masks. And then, and it grew from there. We donated masks to hospitals across the US and then to migrant farm workers. And in the end, it was almost 250,000 masks that we ended up making. And we were able to fund it by, first we just started making them without a funding plan, but then, we reached out to our corporate partners and our foundation partners, and to our retail partners, we launched this buy one, give one mask program. And it was really exciting that at a moment of such huge need, we were able to find a piece that we could do to help, that at the same time helped the communities that we're partnered with in Central America, because in Guatemala, the economy just shut down. The whole country just shut down for 6 months, and hunger became just rampant. And that it was this huge fight just to make sure everyone had enough to eat. But to make that happen, I mean, just like probably most other organizations and companies that survived the pandemic, we had to redesign everything that we did, how we did absolutely everything. And you know, it used to be that every Friday, all the communities we work with across the country would come pick up materials, drop off the fabrics or the products they worked on for the previous week. And we instead had to hire a fleet of trucks that went around every Friday. And then because the country was shut down and you weren't supposed to be traveling, we had to negotiate. The head of our operations in Guatemala, it was like she was a diplomat. She had to negotiate with 70 different government or quasi-government entities to allow our truck fleet to go out. Many of which were, you know, some of them were like community vigilante groups blocking roads, and some of them were, you know, real municipal or state governments.
Yeah.
You know, and we had this whole system where everything was, you know, there was a box of materials for every community, so it was like contactless delivery. But I mean, I could go on and on about how we had to redesign how we did what we do, but I think we were able to do it because we had a really great team that was very collaborative. We were all mission aligned. Yeah. So it was very clear to us what we needed to do. And we worked hard to try to take care of ourselves while we're doing it, which was, you know, everyone was exhausted, right? But we had a whole system of checking in and giving extra time off. And, you know, we have a happiness committee within the organization. And like, you like really had to put time and resources into making sure the team was okay, guys, like to just do double the work, you know, it was, and then to have to undo it, unpivot. Yeah. As the pandemic quote wound down, right. You know, whatever that means, you know, was tough, but we were able to, there were so many things we learned and got better at through that experience, and we've come out much stronger. And it's one of the things I'm most proud of, that we were able to we increased sales for our partner artisans 40% during the pandemic. And which is amazing. It was like a time of huge need. We were able to step up and we grew. We brought in more families, more communities. So it was very awesome. I
mean, if anybody's listening to this, if that stat doesn't stick with you, that's some impressive stuff. And I think the beauty of even just the way that you answered that question mirrored the partnership that you operate within and the respect you operate within across the board, the family you've created. I mean, that's what it felt like to me as you're talking about, you know, the way I framed it earlier of like just the resilience of people and how that you can create that connection no matter what your background is. Like we all understand that other feeling. That is so evident in how you were able to just handle something that even still today, we don't really know. There's still like, we're still operating on shaky ground of exactly what's going to come and how we're going to handle everything. But you know, just the ability for your team to be activated in that space, to be flexible in the pivot of, yes, there's all of this element of like our workload doubled or the uncertainty of work, but then like the human people that are doing this, grappling with their own individual sense of mortality and am I okay? Is my family okay? Is the air I'm breathing okay? All of that reality that each and every one of us individually were dealing with as your business is trying to also create space, safety, and opportunities for not only surviving, but thriving in the midst of a situation that was a really difficult thing to even conceptualize. So thank you so much for sharing that. I feel like we've touched on so many things. Is there anything else that you want to share about Mercado Global? First of all, if there's any way for people to get in touch, to get involved, to become a partner, donor / you know, if you're feeling activated to do this, how might they be able to get in touch with you all?
Yeah, they should go to our website, mercadoglobal.org, MERCADO global.org. Sign up for our e-newsletter. You can contact us through the website. Let us know how you'd like to get involved. You want to do a call, hear about things you could do. Great time to buy holiday gifts right now. Go to our website, check out our holiday gifts. And if you sign up for our e-newsletter, you'll hear about all different kinds of promotions and things we have going on. And we have our big annual Fashion Forward Gala coming up on International Women's Day, March 8th. So that's a key place where we raise a lot of the funds to support our work. So people should, let us know if they'd like to get involved with that.
Yes. I mean, come on now. If you're listening to this and you're not amped about that, like, I don't know, maybe rewind and keep listening to this again. Ruth, I am beyond grateful that you took the time today to share your story, to talk about the incredible people in this incredible family of partners that you have assembled and amplified in ways that I feel like so many of us could learn from. I'm so grateful that our paths crossed 2/20 years ago. I'm just excited to witness all the great work that you have coming up, and to get to know more about all these incredible people that you're working with. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I feel like I want to say it again. Thank you.
Well, wonderful to be here. Grateful for the opportunity.
You're amazing. I told you, wasn't it such a good conversation? Ruth had so much wisdom. I still can't get over that first visual I had of like the two parts of her family coming together with this sense of swelling pride of her kind of purpose and passion being activated in a way she didn't even know. And it's like her going from seeing in black and white to Technicolor, that kind of visual that I have that like sent chills all the way through my body. I hope some version of that resonance came through for you in this episode. My assumption is you're all the way at this point, so hopefully it did. I encourage you to get to know more about Mercado Global. We will have all the information on the show notes page. So if you go to nikkyinnocent.com/podcast, you will see Ruth's face on there. And if you don't see Ruth's face on there, scroll back through some of the episodes, depending on when you're listening to this, and you will have all the links and stuff she talked about and much more. If for some reason you can't find what you're looking for, please feel free to reach out to us on social media. I'm at Nikki Innocent on all the things, or email us at info@nikkyinnocent.com. In the show notes / description of this episode, there should be a link for you to easily access a lot of this information too. So if you're having a hard time grabbing and writing down all the information I'm saying here, give yourself the opportunity to look in the description and just click the link there and you should be good to go. I can't wait for you to join us for the next episode. And if you have anything, the other thing I'll say is if you have anything you want to share with us, any ideas, any feedback, anything you want to hear more about, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. There's a link on the page that I mentioned in the description that you can give us your feedback, and we'd love to hear from you. All right, my friends, I will catch you on the next episode.